Today on America's Test Kitchen, Dan makes garlic lime grilled pork tenderloin steaks. Adam reviews grill gadgets in the equipment corner. And Becky prepares quinoa pilaf with chipotle, queso fresco, and peanuts. Right here on America's Test Kitchen.
You know, this is what really annoys me about backyard barbecue. I take a simple idea, pork tenderloin or two, cut them into easy medallions, throw them on the hot grill, and then what? Then it's like a fire drill. I have all these little pieces. I cook some of them too much, some of them not enough. And the thing I really want, and I'm not getting, is enough surface area to get really good browning throughout. So let's head into the test kitchen with Dan and figure out a much better way to do grilled pork tenderloin steaks.
Okay, so Chris, the idea of tenderloin medallions on the grill sounds good, but in practice it doesn't really work that well. You end up cooking them through before you get good char, and they're a pain to manage. But the idea of getting a lot of surface area on pork tenderloin, really beefing up the flavor, is a good thing. So we're going to attempt to do that with a little different style today. So here I have two 1-pound tenderloins, and the first thing I'm going to do is cut them in half. Now we generally treat tenderloin kind of delicately. It's a relatively expensive cut, and we treat it that way. Today we're really going to rough it up. So I'm going to set these aside here and get some plastic down because I want to pound them to 3/4 inch thick steaks. And we're actually going to think about them as steaks kind of throughout the process of the recipe. Okay. I'm going to lay these down here. It helps to kind of orient them so that they fit into a nice rectangle. Cover with the rest of the plastic. Grab a meat pounder. You don't need a lot of force here, Chris, because it's pretty tender meat to begin with. Great, that's right around 3/4 inch there, Chris, so that looks good. Just take the plastic off. We actually did some really nerdy sciencey math to figure out how much extra surface area we got doing this, and it's about 30% extra just by changing the shape this way. So you have more brownable surface area, which is going to be more flavor. So in that vein, we're also going to cross-hatch these really gently. You have a sharp knife, and all you want to do is just drag it across. We want like 1/16 inch deep grooves in it. It really don't need to put much force. You move kind of quickly like this, about 1/2 inch apart across that to make a little crosshatch, and flip it. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And that's going to open up more little places for marinade to grab and for flavor on the grill to develop. Okay, so I'm just finishing up this last one here. So we've got nice flat pork steaks, and they've got nice little channels in there. We want to add something that those can grab onto, and that's going to be a marinade. So I'm going to start with 2 tablespoons of lime zest. Now this is a fair amount of lime zest. You need a marinade to be pretty strong in order for that to come through in a relatively bland piece of meat. I also have 1/4 cup of lime juice, so that's going to add some acidity to the mixture. And then I have 4 cloves of garlic that I've minced up. It's fat soluble, but it's also water soluble. There's a lot of water in the meat. So we'll get a little bit of garlic flavor throughout with doing this. Next up, I have 2 teaspoons of honey. Now, besides adding some balancing sweetness for all the acidity we have in there, it also contains fructose, which is one of the ingredients that really fuel the Maillard reaction, that browning reaction that we like so much. So that plays a couple of roles. Next up, I have a weird ingredient, it's fish sauce. But I'm only using a little bit. I'm using 2 teaspoons of it, and it's not enough to actually taste fishy. It's really rich in glutamates, which give us that savory, meaty quality. So that's really about getting this to be a meatier cut than what it normally is. Okay, and lastly, I have 3/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. So I'm just going to whisk this stuff together here. I've got a fairly salty mixture here. So you could even call this more of a brinerade than a marinade. You get some of the benefits of brining and moisture moving into the meat, along with the flavor that you get from a marinade. Okay, so that's pretty nice and smooth. So I have 1/2 cup of vegetable oil here, and I'm just going to emulsify it in. So I'm going back and forth with my whisk pretty rapidly in a steady, small stream of oil. What oil does is it distributes the flavor around the meat, helps it cling a little bit, it'll help with browning on the grill as well. All right, great. So we've got an emulsion there. And so this marinade is actually going to do double duty. Obviously going to use it as marinade, but it's also going to be the base for our sauce. So what I'm going to do at this point is measure out 1/2 cup of it. Okay, that's great. So I'll set this aside, and I'll deal with that in just a second. To the rest of our marinade here, I'm going to add my pork steaks. So we want to really toss them well, get that marinade into all those crevices that we created. All right, so if you wouldn't mind opening up that Ziploc bag, I'm going to transfer them into there. So Chris, the name of the game with this marinade is keeping it in really good contact with the meat. So that oil is really going to help do that. But the way we pack it in here and seal it up is actually going to have an impact too. So what I like to do is pull the meat into the bottom here, nice pile, and then roll it up. And you press out all that air. And at the very end, seal it up. So take a look at it. Very little air in there. So it's a nice tight seal. All that marinade is in contact with it.
Instant vacuum pack.
Instant vacuum pack, exactly. So we'll set this aside. This needs about 45 minutes for the salt to really do its work. Also that flavor to kind of really stick to the outside.
And this is set at room temperature.
Set at room temperature, yep. And then I'd like to finish up the sauce that we're gonna serve it with. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my marinade to a serving bowl. And I'm gonna add 4 teaspoons of mayonnaise. So I'm just gonna whisk this in. And mayonnaise works in this application for a couple of reasons. One is that it's an emulsifier, so it's gonna help this emulsion of oil and vinegar stay together. And that's gonna be a thicker consistency than if they were broken. And then it's also creamy, so it kind of tempers the acidity and the salt, makes it a little bit more rounded. And that's it. So I'll set that aside. This needs to sit for probably another 40 minutes, and then it's time to grill.
Here's a quick tip for a great way for reheating steaks. Most people just throw them in a hot oven or into a skillet or on the grill. But here's a much better way that gives you steaks that are almost as juicy as they were originally. So we started by putting these in a 250-degree oven for about 30 minutes. The internal temperature should reach about 110. You want to pat the steaks off to make sure that they're dry. And then you're going to take a tablespoon of oil in a 12-inch skillet, heat that up. Now saute the steaks in the hot pan for 60 to 90 seconds aside. That'll give you a super crisp exterior, actually better than it was the first time around. Another great quick tip from America's Test Kitchen.
Okay, so Chris, I've been preheating the grill for about 15 minutes on high. And what I've done is I've turned off all the other burners and just left one on. So I've got a direct zone for really intense heat. We're gonna use that to char both sides of the steaks, and then we're gonna move it to the cooler side to finish through.
Okay.
All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is clean up the grill. And then I'm gonna do a little oiling. Tip in there. So I went pretty heavy on that. I really wanna make sure that these guys don't stick. Now I've got my steaks right here. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna pop them on here on the hot side. Hear that nice sear. So Chris, we're gonna let that go for about 3 to 4 minutes on that side until we get a nice crust. Now you probably noticed that I did things a little bit differently than normal here, and I didn't wipe off any of the excess marinade.
I wasn't going to say anything.
You weren't? You were just going to let me go?
I was going to let you do it and then say it.
And then yell at me down the line. Okay, well, so I'm going to comp to this one, and we actually did it on purpose. So normally we get rid of that stuff because we want them to brown really quickly. Get rid of that excess moisture, happens a little bit faster. The thing with tenderloin is it's really lean. So when you do develop a really good crust on the outside, it actually ends up being a little tough and leathery. So by leaving that oil and a little bit of moisture in there, we get good charring, but then it's also a lot more tender.
Okay.
Okay, so that's been about 3.5 minutes. We're gonna check that side and see if they're ready to go. Oh yeah, nice crust on there. So I'm just gonna flip over onto the second side. So we'll let it go on this side for another 3 to 4 minutes, and we'll move it off to the indirect side. Okay, Chris, I'm gonna take a look at that second side, see how we're doing. Oh yeah, we got nice grill marks over there. Perfect. Okay, so Chris, now I'm moving them over to the indirect side, and this is where I turn the heat off completely. And I'm gonna do them so that the thicker side is still facing the fire, so that side will cook a little bit more evenly. And now I'm gonna close the grill, so you have good heat circulating all around. I'm gonna cook them this way, Chris, over the indirect heat in the nice closed oven until they register about 140 degrees, which takes anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes. Great. So now I'm just gonna grab my sheet tray here and pop them on. Great. I'm gonna head on in.
Good to go?
Okay, so Chris, while these steaks were resting, I microwaved the sauce for about 15 seconds just to warm it up. It doesn't need to be hot, but we want it a little bit warmer. And then I'm gonna finish it. So I'm adding a tablespoon of coarsely chopped cilantro here and just stirring that in. Gonna add some nice brightness to it. All right, so now it's time to cut and serve. So I'm just gonna do one of these big guys for the two of us. And because we're treating it like a steak, I'm gonna cut it into nice beefy half-inch slices. Give you a few pieces. All right, looks good. We're gonna use some of our sauce. Just gonna drizzle it right over the top. Finally, I'm gonna use a little bit of flake coarse sea salt. This is really light and crunchy, gives you bursts of salt throughout.
The pork is tender, it's juicy. And actually, you're right, you got some of the garlic flavor got into the meat. The sauce is terrific.
Yeah, it's bright, but it's not too bright, you know.
This is really good. So the secret to great grilled pork tenderloin steaks is to take 2 pork tenderloins and turn them into steaks, cut them in half, pound them to about a 3/4 inch, and then we rough them up a little bit with a knife. made a marinade, including a surprise ingredient, which of course is fish sauce. And then we put them out on the grill, 2-level fire. We also reserved some of the marinade, put some mayo in it to make a sauce. And there you have it, from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a really fabulous recipe for a garlic and lime juice grilled pork tenderloin steaks. These are excellent. Every year here at America's Test Kitchen, we like to do a roundup of our favorite grill gadgets and supplies. And this year we're focusing mostly on cleaning up. But I guess we're also going to talk about how to grill a pizza outside.
Oh, are we ever? You know, not everybody has a wood-burning brick pizza oven in the backyard, and building one is thousands upon thousands of dollars. We tested 2 different pizza grilling kits that are designed for your kettle grill, which are a lot cheaper than building a whole brick oven, though they're still not cheap. One of them was $220.
Which is about the cost of your grill.
Well, the other one was $300, which is twice the cost of your grill. But if you're a pizza freak, you'll stop at nothing to get really charred, crisp crust and beautiful brown molten cheese. And that's exactly what we got with this one. This is the $300 version. It's called the Kettle Pizza ProGrate 22, but it produced incredible pizzas. What you get is this collar right here with an opening in the front for you to slide the pizza in with the peel. You get this baking stone that goes in place of the grill grate. You also get a fire basket, so you can put some wood chips in here and get some extra heat going underneath the dome, and this slides in right behind the grill grate. This thing heated up to 900 degrees underneath the top of the grill, and it did a fabulous job on the pizza. We got nice charred crusts, we got beautiful brown molten cheese. You can even see there's this opening on the side here. So we were able to cook 6 pizzas in a row without reloading fuel, but when we wanted more, it's easy to put more charcoal in through this open side.
So that answers my question, which is why not just do it in the oven? You're going to get more heat.
You get a lot more heat out of the grill than you do in the oven. You also get that nice char grilled flavor. So this is an expensive toy for pizza aficionados at $300, but it is cheaper than building a brick oven in the backyard. Now let's move to the scrubbers, Chris. I've convinced you, haven't I?
Something cheaper.
I have 10 different scrubbers here. The price range was $8 to $40. And what you want to do is heat up that grate and then scrub off all the gunk. We tested it by coming up with a goo concoction that was a mixture of honey, mustard, barbecue sauce, and molasses. And we baked that onto the grates of our favorite gas grill and favorite charcoal grill, and then we got scrubbing like crazy. This one's a little different from the others. It's not a brush at all. This is called the Grill Stone by a company called Earthstone International, and it's a pumice. And it actually had very clear pros and cons to us. It did a great job scrubbing the goo off the grill grates, whether it was hot or cold even. And the more we scrubbed back and forth, we wore grooves into the pumice, so it did an even better job cleaning the grates. However, there were a couple of downsides. Number one, if we were cleaning a hot grate, short handle, so our hands were right on top of that heat. Number two, it made a lot of pumice dust on the grate, so you had to actually rinse off the grate before you could cook on it. Number three, this pumice is good only for 3 or 4 cleanings, and then you have to replace it. So using this every day is not that practical, but it did such a good job for only $10 for the set that we would use this once a year just to recondition the grates.